Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from all your worries sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to get away? Sometimes you wanna go where everybody knows your name, and they're always glad you came. You wanna be where you can see our troubles are all the same. You wanna be where everybody knows your name. You wanna go where people know people are all the same. You wanna go where everybody knows your name.
And so we are in week 2 of Where Everybody Knows Your Name. So we're talking about the importance of what it means. And Hannah did an amazing job of kicking this off last week. But it's not enough just to talk about being in community. It's not enough just to say it, right? Just like everything else that we do in the church, we're really great of talking things to death, debating it, arguing about it, but we rarely ever put it into practice, right? And so we don't talk about it enough, and it falls into a disenchanted category of trying to love your neighbor, but it's messy. And sometimes it can go nowhere if we don't love our neighbor, if there's no action in place. And we will avoid being in community, loving one another, because simply we go, ooh, I don't have time for that mess. And some of you, last night I heard about some neighbors. It's really messy. It can be really messy on a street with certain neighbors and certain streets that you live on. In the Heights, if you're going to move to the Heights, talk to the neighbors before you buy the house, right? And see what you're in for, because you never know. But it's usually too messy, and understandably so. And so this would be an easy concept, being community, loving one another, if we started at 0, right? But there's not many in the crowd, right? The ones that don't understand a word that I'm saying right now. But if you are above the age of like 3, okay, you have some baggage. You've got some things in your life. You don't start at 0 when it comes to relationships, because chances are somebody has hurt you in some way, which makes relationships hard. And it can make you kind of scared to really jump into it. So to begin, to have that clean slate, we don't all get that, but to begin, it's not always easy. And if you're listening and you weren't born yesterday, like I said, it's easier said than done unless it's brand new. There will always be some sort of setback. There will always be something. When I do marriage counseling, and I'm like, I'm so glad you guys are in love and you're great, but there's some past, right? And you might not have it now because you're kind of in the honeymoon stage, right? But let's talk about 5 years from now. Let's talk about 10 years from now. When that baggage that you had when you were a kid or growing up or in a relationship where somebody hurt you, at some point, we're going to take it and we're going to heave it onto the people that we love. And be like, will you carry this baggage with me, right? And then it weighs them down, and it's really not fair to them. So we end up in this place where we got to do some work to really be in relationship with one another. Previous generations, there was all sorts of misconnections and opportunities that just because distance and technology wasn't there yet, but we are the most connected generation this world has ever seen, ever. How we are able, the speed in which we are able to travel to people, the way that we are able to communicate with people at high rates. Like, I could talk to anybody I want around the world right now, just by a phone call. That is very recent. As far as humanity is concerned, that is a recent thing. So like I said, it's easier said than done. But we're going to talk about a specific struggle today that elicits a lot of shame and a lot of embarrassment. It's a serious one that can even be deadly. It's a threat to our lives. It has the ability to put to a complete halt the opportunity to be in a place where everybody knows your name. This, what we're going to be talking about today, is actually shown up in by the Surgeon General of the United States of America, put out a report, an 80-page advisory. This is of 2023. You can look this up for yourself. I highly recommend it. It's overwhelming. I'm just going to say that. But it's very interesting to look at. So in 2023, this warning, this 80-page advisory came out, naming this as one of the biggest threats to humanity right now. Both mental and physical health in the United States, more dangerous than diabetes, obesity, or smoking 14 cigs a day. Okay? The problem, and it's crazy to even say this, because you're like, really? It's on loneliness. The problem is loneliness. And some of you have experienced loneliness. You might be experiencing it right now. It's a psychological state where you are lacking authentic, intimate relationships. You are lacking these, and so then you feel like you're alone. And I'm not talking about like the 90s romantic rom-com where it's like, how can you be a room full of people and feel so alone? You know, not that kind of stuff. I'm meaning like you really feel like you're at this alone. You go to a job full of people, but you feel like you're alone. You're in a house full of people, but you feel like you're alone. You're in a relationship with another person, but you feel like you're alone. It's real, and it happens. The American Psychiatric Association put a report in early 2024, and these are kind of just summing up. There was a lot of numbers. Again, go check it out. But I kind of summed up some of them. It said that 30% of adults are lonely at least once a week over the past year. 10% say they're lonely every day. Every day something happens. Ages 18 to 24 reported, 30% of them reported that they feel like it's every day. So it's not even like there's some, like, because older than that, they're like, oh, some just feel lonely a week. But in that age range, they feel lonely all the time. 30% of them. At least 2 out of 5 people have feelings of loneliness. So if I had everybody stand up and I said, I had 5 people stand up and I said 3 people sit down, those 2 people would feel lonely. But we wouldn't admit that. You could look around the room and nobody would, I'm lonely, right? And sometimes, can you trust it, right? How do you really know? But if they were being truthful, 2 out of 5, that's a lot. It's usually a low percentage of will be feeling or admit or even be able to talk about it. And so what are people doing to combat this? This was another thing in the report. 50% find distraction from their loneliness in things like TV, podcasts, or social media. They give themselves the illusion, like it's a placebo effect, right? It's a quick Band-Aid, but as soon as they turn it off, they're lonely again. And I feel it's kind of the seed of the doom scroll, right? You're like, as long as I'm looking at other people's lives, I feel like I'm involved with it, and I don't feel alone until I put it away. 41% say they go for a walk when they feel lonely. 38% say they reach out to friends or family, which is good. 31% say they connect to a pet when they're feeling lonely. Pet they want or didn't want, I don't know. Another 31% say they exercise when they feel lonely. 26% say they eat more than usual. I think I'm in that category. 13% use drugs or alcohol to kind of numb that feeling. 9% connect to a therapist or a counselor. 9% connect to a human that can actually help them, right? Therapist or counselor. And 6% volunteer. And that's how we've been combating it. So the first thing that I want you to know is that if you're feeling alone, you're not alone in feeling alone. Yeah. If you're feeling alone, you're not the only one. You're probably sitting close to somebody who also has the same feelings of loneliness. And a lot of the times when we feel lonely, we like to tell ourselves because it feels better because they're pity parties. And I'm not trying to shame you or anything like that, but I'm just being factual. That's what it is. We're like, well, I'm alone and nobody likes me, right? And so you kind of roll into this. I call it the kamikaze effect, right? You're just barreling down because you think that the world's against you or whatever it may be. You're not lonely because you're not successful or good enough It's not that you're unlikable or unlovable. You're not unlucky or unworthy. You are not difficult or annoying. Sometimes we can be, and hopefully have friends close enough that tell us these kind of things. But it's not about being difficult or annoying, because I imagine there's probably someone just as annoying or difficult as you out there you can be friends with. Or it might be a little bit of both. Not more than the rest of us that we feel this way. We're all a little weird in some way. And I just preface people when they meet me, I'm like, I'm strange. So chances are I'm going to do something weird, and I'm sorry, but hopefully it doesn't. But tell me if it offends you. You won't hurt my feelings, I promise. But you don't need to feel ashamed or embarrassed, because your loneliness is not an accusation of your unworthiness. It's a signal. It's like a red light that's going off in your car. Hey, something is wrong. I need you to check on this. That feeling of loneliness, it's not just secluded to you. It's a warning sign. So the mind is trying to tell you, you have an unmet need for connection, which is what God designed us for. Loneliness isn't a sign that something is wrong with you. It's a signal that signals you to God that what God has designed you to do, that you need to work on something. That God is trying to tell you something sometimes. And your body is honoring the way that God created you. It's raising the red flag for you to go, hey, I'm not okay. These feelings that I'm feeling right now, I'm not all right. And I need to reach out to somebody. First, quickest way is talk to the big man upstairs and say, Lord, I don't know what to do with these feelings. What does this mean? Where am I missing the mark? And you hand it up. And then, or you reach out to others. It's a signal. It's saying, I want to reposition. I want to reposition you guys, your loneliness, from a you problem to an us problem. Loneliness is not random or unexplainable or unavoidable. It's a collective loneliness that is actually the result of a culture that I believe we are all actively co-creating and building a culture around ourselves that's causing us to be more lonely. And I know this is a hot take, whatever, my hot take, but I kind of wish the government would just ban TikTok or something like that. And I just mean to say, because there's people that have livelihoods built around this, and I'm not saying, let's be real, it's not that the design of it or the program is evil. It's just, it's man-made. It's a thing, right? It can't think for itself. We're the ones that put the content in there and think for it, but I feel it inflames the worst part of humanity. Pride, selfishness, the idea that we are the main character. There's so many main characters on TikTok. I don't know how it's possible for there to be so many main characters. It's confusing. But we all think we're the main character of everybody's story. And these kind of things make that happen. So we've gone from replacing front porches with attached garages to seeing our neighbors less than ever, keeping our faces and our phone, relying on DoorDash, Uber, and Amazon to bring us the things that we need so we can avoid people. When people ring the bell, do you drop to the ground and say, don't nobody move, act like we're not here, right? Is that a thing? And I get it, some of the salesmen are annoying, whatever, but we end up in this place where we're crafting our lives around avoiding people. That's not healthy. It is not a healthy thing to be. And it's very confusing to me because I grew up in a family that was very jovial, right? My father especially, speaking of Father's Day, he never met a stranger. At his funeral, probably, I think about 300 to 400 people showed up. I didn't even know he knew that many people. And it was a 3-hour funeral because they let it be a little open mic, which was a terrible idea. And people just wouldn't shut up about him, okay? But because he was very friendly, so that's what I know. And so when Hannah and I were living on our own in a house and all that, I was so confused when I would have neighbors that would completely avoid interaction. They would pull up, open the garage, go in the garage, shut the garage, and you wouldn't see them again until the morning when the garage opened and they left, right? And I'm like, how do they do things? How do they get their mail? Are they doing it in the middle of the night where I can't see them? Why are they so avoidant of other humans? It's because we've created this culture. And it's also wild to me that when we lived in an apartment, and I'm not trying to shame or guilt anybody, but there was a point, like I'm a friendly person, right? I like to know who lives around me, and I like them to know me. And I had neighbors that were they're literally 10 feet from me. There's just sheetrock in between us, and I never saw their face. Like, how is this possible? We live in a culture, and we're building and designing around it. None of those conveniences are bad, but we're designing for convenience, independence, and privacy. Everything that we do. It's not bad, but we end up prioritizing certain values above others, and we're good at it. And the products results in the long run, the short term are comforts, but there's long-term effects to the comfort and immediate. So here is some of those results, all right? So again, this is all from the reporting. We have a rapid rate of decline in roughly the past decade, according to census. In 2010, adults spent, on average, 6.5 hours a week with friends. 6.5 hours a week. In 2021, a decade later, it decreased by 50%. Adults now only spend about 2 to 3 hours a week with friends. And wouldn't you know it, it's impacting us. Shocker. Every age group and demographic is lonelier than ever before. And perhaps the most alarming statistics are the first time in recorded history, younger populations are lonelier than the sick and elderly. Younger populations are lonelier than the sick and elderly. And we are indeed in the midst of an epidemic, and there's a great need for community. Also, an incredible opportunity for us as believers to reach out. There has never been a moment, I feel, in history that you could say to somebody, I want to hear your story, and they have been waiting weeks, months, years for somebody just to say those words to them. Get ready, it might be a tsunami once they start talking. Just wait it through, you won't drown. Incredible opportunity to live according to God's design for us, that instructs us throughout Scripture. In a world full of lonely and isolated people, reaching out is increasingly counterculture. Reaching out to people is counterculture. They're like, why would you even talk to me? Why would you even bring that up? That's weird. Prioritizing connection, community, and caring for one another is weird. And this is what it's like. It's like there's a song that everybody likes, and we're all trying, there's a rhythm to that song, okay? When you get up in the morning, you might not realize that, but there's a rhythm to your day that you hope to have. And in that song, if somebody comes along and interrupts that rhythm, you get upset, right? Okay, think about it. You've left work, you have a rhythm for getting ready for work, but one of your kids, if you're a parent, has disrupted that rhythm. You get a little upset, okay? You leave the house. I mean, hopefully the car is running to the right rhythm and it starts. If it doesn't, if it fires weird, oh man, the rhythm is really messed up. Oh, I got to deal with this now? I have places to be. There's a song that has to play out for my day, my song. I need to hear that song. I need to feel good about it. So you get in the traffic, right? And you're thinking, it's going to take me this long to get to work, and this is going to be my exit, and then somebody cuts you off, messes up your song. It's like a scratch record. What do? You get mad. You get to work. You have a special idea of how the day is supposed to go, and you can decide, if I do this at this time and then it works out this way, my rhythm is good, and I'm going to be happy until you get that report, or the boss ask you to do something that's not your job, right? Your rhythm's messed up. You get upset. You come home, and you're expecting everybody just to be in love with one another, and this is the safe space, but your kids are fighting, or your spouse is mad at you, you did something stupid, whatever it is. The rhythm's messed up. No snuggling on the couch that night. There's a certain rhythm that we expect. And once that rhythm gets messed up, we get irritated because our comfort is threatened. Because we really thought we had the rhythm right. See, the messiness of people can get in the way of this rhythm, the busyness, success, wealth, safety, comfort, independence. It can all be frustrating if it's in our way. And I understand, I hear you. I'm not sitting here saying that I don't get frustrated. I'm not sitting here telling you that, like, oh, I'm just as easy as going, and everybody can do what you want, and God's blessed my every path. There's people that make me royally angry. Royally, right? And it usually has to do with my own profession when I see the news come out, and this pastor's done this, and and I'm like, why do I even do what I do? Because they make me look bad, right? Hannah had to hear me yesterday. I was yelling and screaming from the bathroom. I was on, TMI, I know. I was on the toilet, and I read something, and I was like, why? Right? And Hannah's like, are you okay in there? And I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm okay. It has nothing to do with what's going on in here. It has to do with my phone. She was scared for a second. See, I'm not perfect, guys. I'll tell you too much. TMI. These become roadblocks of the culture and make it difficult. And seemingly, it seems like an unavoidable future, but you're not the one, right? You're not the only one. But it's coming. Disruption's coming to all of us. Our rhythm is going to be messed up. And it's not always at the mercy of an event that will send you spiraling. Loneliness that we are experiencing is not inevitable. See, we think that like it's inevitable, I'm going to feel lonely. Now, there are factors and circumstances that can cause us to feel lonely in our life, but it's a state of mind. There might be circumstances, and this is one of the things that people like look at like real Christians and like, y'all are weird because you're going through a difficult time and you're still smiling, right? It's weird. But it's possible that it doesn't have to be inevitable. So across the globe, a lot of us are trending in the wrong direction. Research shows that 78% of young Americans would say that they are lonely. 50 to 60% higher than other countries. Think about that. I believe in part it's because of their traditions and social norms that they have in other countries that encourage them to have community, that they've even built infrastructure and designed to promote connection in community. But we are not. There's not a lot of that happening here. And the truth is that there's nobody outside of your home that's going to encourage you to have good relationships. Other than here, of course, at Village Heights. I don't know about other churches, but I can say here, I can't speak for them, but I can say here, we're going to encourage you to do that. But nobody at work is going to be like, hey, you know what, go home and be with your family. They're going to be like, no, stay here and work. There's deadlines to meet. There's money to be made, right? Don't you want to be successful? Don't you want to be the manager? Don't you want this? Well, you need to stay here and work. They're not going to say, oh, you've done too much. Go be with your kids. Go do all that. They're not going to say that. If it doesn't make you money, unless it's your business, you can make those decisions. Our jammed-packed schedules, undesignated connections become inconvenient. Have you ever been inconvenienced? Like you're walking through a store and you're like, I got somewhere to be, and you see someone you know? I would never do that. But you go down a different aisle, it's like, oh, I'll get pickles next time. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't have time for that mess. We do this. Everybody's guilty of it at some point in nature. You better not avoid me. I'll find you. Value-based on, I didn't get anything out of that. We do a lot of a value based on that. Am I going to get something out of this? No, then I'm not going to do it. And that's not always healthy. Our culture is being crafted for and celebrates independence. There's a lot of a pride that comes with our identity. However, we are designed to be interdependent. We are designed as humans to be interdependent. If we were designed to be independent, God would have given us his power to create life, to keep the world spinning, all of these things. And there's some religions out there that think that's true. But to my knowledge and history shows that's not the case. I don't control the sun. I don't control the moon and the stars. I can wish a plant to grow, but it's not going to grow unless I do the things that God created to do to make it happen. So I'm not in control. So we are created to be interdependent, meaning we do depend on each other, but there is parts that are ours, parts that we are responsible for. We are to prioritize the value of community over convenience, to value transparency and authenticity over impressing one another, to be honest even if it doesn't produce immediate success. That's a tough one. To be honest even though if it doesn't support your success. To value quality of life over comparison or comparable advancement. So Hannah and I have kind of grown up in this hustle culture. Like it's, you got to move, you got to pull up your bootstraps, you got to get it, you got to go, got to go, got to go. There's someone else who's going to beat you, you got to get it, you got to get after it, right? And I can even see that translated, oddly enough, because it's based on the Bible. I can see that in church. I see pastors doing this all the time. They're hustling, get more people. And they get all the people in there. And then they don't have time for themselves or God, and then they end up messing up. And then all those people that gathered to go see them, because they were authority or wisdom in their life, they now watch them fail in a very public way, hurting their image of Jesus. Hustle culture. We grew up in this. You grew up in this. And don't get me wrong, there is times for hustle, to pull up your bootstraps. But you will always be encouraged to do that. Rarely ever encouraged to say, hey, let's sit and contemplate existence. Let's take a moment and just think about, where do you come from? How do you even exist? What tells your heart to keep beating? It's not like breathing. You could stop. I could say right now, hey, think about your breathing. And all of you are right now trying to make yourself breathe. Right? And then at some point you forget and your body just keeps breathing. How does that happen? Where does that come from? We need to think about these, contemplate our existence. So for our kids, we try to create rhythms of realness in our life. And I'm not always the best. I'm more of like in the moment realism, right? If you ever hung around me long enough, you know that I like awkward moments. Because awkward moments is when reality happens. You see real in people, right? It's like they don't know how to, like, oh, it doesn't compute, and then the real part of them comes out, right? And I love it, okay? And I'm sorry if I've done that to you. And if you think I'm doing it to you, just tell me to stop, and I'll stop, I promise. But we try to do that with our kids. Hannah's a lot better at creating these rhythms, these things that we do. And you've heard me talk about it before. One of the things that we do, we come up with different names for it. It's based around dessert, and it's on a Friday, right? And the names usually rhyme in some form or fashion. But we call them, what's the latest one we've done? I can't think. Popsicle persiflage. You might have to Google that one. Persiflage. But basically, we sit around at the end of the week on a Friday. It doesn't always go well. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect every time. But we sit down and we say, hey, what do you want to talk about that happened this week? Good or bad, right? And it creates these opportunities of sharing and bonding, right? And so that it reminds them, hey, you're not alone. We're in this together, and we're here to help one another through everything, good and bad. So we try to do this. We try to create these rhythms for our kids, rhythms of realness. And so without expectation of outcome, just to live in proximity of others and to be and acknowledge one another, understanding others' proximity, how close they are, and how that affects our proximity to God. This is a process of small practices, appreciating, retrospection, willing to take a moment to evaluate, to work on character development, even if the day is no longer efficient. The rhythm got broken. I can remember some of my hardest seasons and ones where we had people to lean on, connect with, usually ended in a positive outcome, advantageous direction that some people would send us in. It would oppose to these seasons of solitude, destruction, when you feel like there's no way out. And yeah, it's messy. It is messy, and it's scary, and it's inconvenient, and just the thought of having to get involved in the mess of your neighbors and family is exhausting. You're just tired even thinking about it. Sometimes when people come, they have an issue, and they're like, I got to get this off my chest. Sure, let it rip, whatever it is. And they'll get to the end of it. I'm like, I don't even know these people, and I'm exhausted. I'm emotionally drained. by your problem, what you got going on. It's completely understandable. And so a lot of the time, our involvement or need can be overwhelming to others, and mainly because we are inept in creating boundaries. So we can design lives that prioritize connection without losing our minds. It is possible for you to listen to the problems of your friends and your family and your neighbors, your coworkers, and say, oh man, I'm so sorry, and then you put up a boundary, like, but that's too much. There's nothing I can do about it, right? And if they keep coming back to you and just wailing on you, right, so then you end up being the fire hydrant, right? And you've heard the saying, if somebody's treating you like a fire hydrant, that means somebody's peeing on them, okay? And so there's boundaries that you can put in place to keep this from being so overwhelming. Because I'm saying this, and some of you are like, I don't know if this is for me. You don't know the people in my life, the problems that they have. It's daunting. Honest connection with respectful boundaries. This produces healthier people. It helps you raise healthier kids. And we can be a light because of this in a world of comparison and social isolation. It feels less with competition and loneliness and can all be done by following one commandment, the start and the finish of our lives. One commandment. It's right here, John 13, 34, 35. And if you've been in church at all, I hope that you've heard this scripture before. It says, so now I am giving you a new commandment. Not saying that the other commandments are gone. He's saying this commandment is going to fill the other commandments, right? So I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world that you are my disciples. Remember we just talked about earlier and what social media does to us? We want to be known. There's pride involved in that. But you want to be known. He's telling us how you can be known right here. He said to be known. It's not through our success. It's not through our wealth. It's not through our well-behaved kids. God, that would never happen. It's not through the titles we hold. It's not by the number of followers we have. It's not through the size of our companies. It's not through the size of our house. Not by the brand of our clothes. Most certainly not by our politics. Not through how much money we make or spend or even give. Not through how well we obey the religious rules of the day. Not by the social and cultural ideologies we ascribe to. Not by the passive-aggressive bumper stickers that we might have by our car. That's not how they're going to know who you truly are and who you truly follow. Says it easy. But by the way we love one another. We can fulfill the new commandment, and only Jesus, we might be the only Jesus they might see because of this commandment, by designing lives that prioritize community and connection. But here's the hard news. You're probably never going to experience or see community in that way unless you take the first step. Unless you take the first step, you're probably never going to see this. Until you're the one that steps out and starts saying hello to your neighbors and asking about their lives. Not say, hey, how are you doing? Good, great, let's go back inside. Not that. Hey, how are you doing? Did the Heights tornado affect you? How did you do in the pandemic? Did you have to switch jobs? How are your parents? How are your kids? How's your job going? How's that car? I saw you working on it. These are the opportunities. These are the things that you will have to go first. From a logical standpoint, going first to make the changes you need to make to design a life that creates space to build, prioritize, and cultivate community. You're not going to see it unless you take the first step. So take the initiative, make the plans, commit to it. Be the key, the big key. And just show up. That's a part of it. Just show up. It's so easy to disappear nowadays and hide away. Then all the fences got torn down because of the tornado and stuff, and we were exposed for a little bit, and I didn't like it. I mean, I'm not going to lie. And I'd be like, my neighbors can see me and blah, 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 and I'm texting, I don't want to own it, and we rent it, and the owner, we're talking to them, and they're getting it built, and I sent a picture. I was like, oh, the fence is down. They're going to be building a new one soon. And he laughed, and he goes, oh, yeah, that's how it was when we moved in. And I was like, what? He said there was like a chicken wire about this tall. That's what divided. And he said you had to be extra neighborly in those times. And I was like, wow, that sounds difficult, but it makes sense now why we were so closed off. Because the fences just get higher and higher. We're more divided, more divided, more divided. I'm not saying go tear down your fences or anything like that, right? Because that's just a thing. We have to make some action, right? Invite your neighbor across the fence. Or build a gate, if you're real brave, build a gate in their fence, right? We had some neighbors make a joke while the AT&T guy was there to say, hey, let's build a ladder just to get over the fence and come hang out. And I'm laughing, ha, ha, ha. And the AT&T guy was like, please, God, no. Don't ever let that happen, please. And the AT&T guy laughed because he knew what I was dealing with. So we need to do that. Take initiative, keep showing up. Even the people that flake and bail, trust me, they will. If Hannah and I let ourselves be affected by flakes, Village Heights would have been dead in the water a long time ago. If I had a nickel every time somebody new came and they're overly excited and they're like, man, we're going to be the donut ministry, and da-da-da. I've heard that so many times. No shame if you want to do that, whatever. But usually those are the ones that I see to leave the quickest. I don't know why. There's a science behind it. We'll talk about that later. It's not about this message. But Village Heights would be shuttered. Its philosophical doors. And we would be dead in water a few months in existence if we let the flakes bother us, but we keep showing up. I'm not saying creating a space or just for space's sake, but lead with authenticity and vulnerability. If your community is guarded, somebody has to take the first step, possibly the second step, the third step, the fourth step, and so on, until they feel like they have a safe space and they can trust you. To create a community of people who can be trusted, especially with their faults and their weaknesses. You have to go first. You've got to be the one. Say, call me for anything until you lose your voice. You can bring all the meals and say all the prayers, but until you lead by example, by confessing your sins and saying that I'm not perfect. These are my struggles. These are my fears. These are my longings. Until you do that, people are not really going to open up. You have to. Without taking that first step, it's likely you won't see that type of community. And there's hundreds of verses encouraging compassion with one another. And I want to share one example. I'm going to finish with this. I'm going to share one example of what it means to go first. And it's a story from Matthew 26. And I believe it's likely because it was news to me. It was news to me at one point that this was in here. You probably have never seen it that way. And if you read this and completely missed it, don't feel bad. I did as well, many years, not realizing how powerful it was. It was presented to me like this portion of the story. Jesus is in the garden, and it's late night with his disciples. He knew he was going to be crucified the next day. He knew the plans, and he does a holy thing, right? He goes out and he prays. He goes in the wilderness, and that's all we know. We know that Jesus does his Jesus thing, and he goes out and praise. The end. That's what it's always been presented as. But what we missed, usually, before he goes to do that, what he says to his disciples. In Matthew 26:38, it says, he told them, my soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. I remember a time when I read this, and it finally struck me one day. I almost couldn't believe that I haven't seen this before. It's so potent and impactful that now when I retell the story of like that moment in history, what Jesus did with it, I would tell them that Jesus was with, and it kind of looked more like something like this. Even though he's talking to the people that he knew, one of them was going to deny him. He would have said something like this, hey guys, so I'm not okay. I'm just honestly so overwhelmed by everything I'm carrying right now. And frankly, I'm just really, really sad. I know it's late. And I mean, I know there isn't really anything you can do to fix the situation, but I was just wondering, would you stay up with me tonight? I really don't want to be alone right now. Jesus presented himself in this way. The strongest being ever showed weakness, showed grief, heartache, and asked his followers, I know you can't do anything, but can you just stay awake with me? Just be with me. Right here, the last hours on earth, the God of the universe is showing us that we are created to need one another. It's not a sin or a failure or a flaw to have a moment of insecurity. It's a feature of being made in the image of God. He's showing us that what it looks like to lead by going first, not with power or strength, but with humility, honesty, and vulnerability. He asked his friends for help during a really dark night. And it's the same as probably most of you in this room have been in these moments. And I've had more dark nights in my life that I would like to remember. And most of the time, I knew the right way through, but I was still paralyzed. I knew the right answer, but I was paralyzed. And often in fear of judgment, not being enough, or letting people down, I would cry out to God for help, hoping for a miracle, that he would just do the hard work for me, just make it happen. And more often than not, God sent the right person. Rather than coming down out of the sky, he sent the right person. A lot of the time, it's Hannah for me, but sometimes others. And I can mark the moments, and so can you. Without an extended hand, you would still be in that dark place. If somebody didn't reach down and say, hey, come on, I got you. I'll walk through. I'll stay up with you. You'd still be there. You'd probably still be living in it. This is why we were created to do life together. Because my darkest nights might be right in the middle of your day. When you have the capacity and strength that I don't, you have hope that I can borrow until the sunrise. As Christians, we feel this pressure to be the solution for every problem. Truthfully, Jesus is the solution. We're here to bring hope to others, to be the light that points people to the source of hope, borrowing and lending to and from one another, reminding each other that no matter how dark the night is, the morning is coming. So your dark night is not always some traumatic near-death experience. You might be financially stressed or have challenges in your marriage. Maybe it's caring for aging parents or exhaustion of young kids. It might be losing your job or waiting for a diagnosis. It could be the death of a dream, simply something too much to carry on your own. And after practicing this over and over and over again with others around you, it's inevitable. If you do this, if you share, you be vulnerable, you welcome people to the dark place saying, can you be with me? If you do this over and over again with the people around you, before you know it, you'll be in a place where everybody knows your name. Because and they won't forget it, the people that gave you the hand, will you ever forget who they are? No. They will always be there. So remember, your loneliness is not a flaw. It's a feature that God has designed inside of us. And while it's scary to go first, to lead by example, to be vulnerable, in the light of the theme of what we're going through and what we're talking about in this collection, this one really dates me, and just hear me out on it. It's a fear we all have that we might make the wrong step. We might mess up the rhythm. To expose and to admit that we don't have it all together, essentially asking others to pause or disrupt the rhythm of life, the song of their day for us. We are all singing this in our head to some degree, and it's the posture anytime somebody wants to take a first step. It's originated by the Beatles. It's adapted by a show called The Wonder Years. What would you do if I sang out of tune? Would you get up and walk out on me? There's people in your life. They see your rhythm. And they love you enough not to disrupt it. And they're wondering, hey, if I sang out of tune, would you walk out on me? And they're waiting to see what you do. And continuing the lyrics, lend me your ears, and I'll sing you a song. And I will try not to sing out of key. Baby, I get by with a little help from my friends. With a little help from my friends. All I need is my buddies. With a little help from my friends. I'd said I'm going to get by with a little help from my friends. So I don't know if that's what I'm sure to do, but with a little help from my friends, I'm going to make it with my friends. With a little help from my friends. I'm going to keep trying. With a little help from my friends, I'm going to keep trying. Take the first step. Start building the community around you. And you'll be surprised to see the people that come out of the woodwork who just need a little help from a friend. And if they sing a little out of tune, don't walk out on them. Stay there. Be there with them. And they will never forget your name. Let's pray. Jesus, you were the ultimate example in this. You came to a world, you came down and hung out with us, you stepped off your throne to show us what it means to be human. And how we are designed, and you showed us in every way, even this vulnerable moment that we have missed. Sometimes we get so lost in your power that we forget that you were also human. You took on humanity to show us how humanity is supposed to operate. And so right now, as we continue to develop on our own lives, in our communities, in our homes, in our churches, in our work, all of these places, continue to give us the patience needed and the courage. Be willing to let the record scratch, let the rhythm be changed so that we can give a little help to our friends, that we can be the hope they needed in the darkest moment in their life, that because we had enough light for them. Show us what that is. Show us these people in our life, because ultimately, then we get to lead them to you, the ultimate life. And Lord, if there's anybody in the house right now or listening to this message that they feel this loneliness, and they need a little help from a friend, whoever that is, give them the courage to step out. Or send the right person to extend that hand so that they can be pulled out of that darkness and reminded that they're not weird, they're not an outcast, nobody wants them there. But they are a part of a community and part of something bigger than themselves, bigger than me, bigger than anybody. Be a part of your kingdom. So help us, Lord. Help us. In Jesus' powerful name I say, amen.